Hello, I'm Tim Smith with the Adams County Historical Society, and here today with American Battlefield Trust. And we're standing on the property generally referred to as the Emanuel Harmon Farm at the time of the battle. And of course, this is the old Gettysburg Country Club property. And you might know that there is a large part of the Country Club property that is currently being acquired by American Battlefield Trust. And just to give you a little background of the history of this site that's been privately owned for many, many years, the whole area around us is farmland at the time of the battle. And this area was first settled in the 1730s and 40s by Scotch, Irish, and German immigrants. And the tract that is currently being purchased by the trust is part of the Miles Sweeney property. He definitely appears here by 1765, could have first came into the area in 1741 possibly. Miles Sweeney was an American Revolutionary War veteran. You might know his grandson was Harvey Sweeney that lived in town of Gettysburg at the time of the battle, and just a large Scotch-Irish family. And this particular tract was a scene of heavy fighting on the morning of July 1st, 1863. And this tract abuts the bridge over Willoughby's Run, an area that is just filled with history involving the first day's fighting in the first shots of the battle. This area here is where Archer's Brigade of Alabama and Tennessee soldiers crossed on the morning of July 1st in an attack against the Iron Brigade on McPherson's Ridge. This area also is the same place where Brockenbrough and Pettigrew's brigades crossed in the afternoon of July 1st in some of the heaviest fighting of the battle along the banks of Willoughby's Run. One thing is interesting, since this area was privately owned for so many years, there's sort of a tree line along Willoughby's Run that was more open at the time of the battle. And now acquiring property on both sides of the run is going to allow the national park to properly restore the area to more of its Civil War appearance. It was very popular early on to place tree lines along the edge of the park property to hide modern development. So the acquisition of properties that were significant to the battle right along the park boundaries allows us more ability to restore to its Civil War appearance. And you might be able to look through the trees and see the McPherson farm in the distance. At the time of the Civil War, Edward McPherson owned the property on the east side of Willoughby's Run. And we mentioned this is the Emanuel Harmon farm. The property that the Country Club house sits on was part of Abraham Spangler's farm at the time of the battle. And we actually have an account from a granddaughter of Abraham Spangler about the first day's fighting. Her name was Sadie Hoffman. And she says, "We were cozy enough and were together in the cellar, but an awful conflict was happening outside in the yard and around the house. Terrible screams of men and screams of shell. We sat silently praying most of the time to keep ourselves together. Grandfather kept praying aloud that the war might soon end and we would have union under God." Of course, when the family emerged from the cellar, there were dead soldiers everywhere. Quickly, their house became a hospital, their crops were destroyed, their animals were killed, and their field was a graveyard.
Thanks so much, Tim. First of all, we've shot a lot of videos in association with trying to raise the needed funds for this tract, but never with you before. And this is sort of your place, the Adams County official historian, Adams County Historical Society. So thanks so much for being here. Now, two things. First of all, this is one of the rare cases, this stream behind us is one of the rare cases where Tim has convinced the American Battlefield Trust and me to actually change the way we've said things. And we say Willoughby's Run, why should we?
Well, The man who owned the property where this stream intersects with Marsh Creek south of us was Willoughby Winchester.
Willoughby Winchester.
And it came from an early survey of that property, the name Willoughby's Run. One other thing I wanted to mention is that in all the accounts of the fighting on July 1st, definitely General James Archer was captured by members of the 2nd Wisconsin on the west side of Willoughby's Run. And we're not exactly sure where he's captured, but this purchase will definitely put that event on property that's publicly owned.
Good, and not only publicly owned, but we're acquiring a parking lot. There's a lot of parking lot there that won't survive, I hope. The restoration of this tract, that'll all come later. But there is now going to be public access for people to visit a battlefield. They need safe access in order to be able to do so. Now, the other thing I wanted to say just real quick, and this might tie things up for us, is you talked about what the Spangler family experienced when they saw the aftermath, but within a few years, this area would be known for something else, a commercial enterprise and a spring water distribution center. Let's hear your summary of that.
So, you know, it's fascinating, but the story told later by the promoters of the Springs Hotel is that during the fighting, members of the Iron Brigade who were wounded managed to crawl over to a spring to obtain water. And as they were washing their wounds, they realized the water had medicinal qualities and it was healing their wounds. So they created a spring, not only where you could take baths, but drink this water that had, it was kind of a miracle cure.
It reminds me of the water at the end of Indiana Jones 3, if you see it healing the wounds there.
And they eventually built a spring house and promoted it and built a hotel here. And not only was the Gettysburg Springs Hotel a place where visitors could come and enjoy the spring water, but also it was a probably one of the first real tourist industries built in the area. The hotel to veterans came here, they stayed here. In 1869, the veterans had a huge reunion here. And so it was a very commercial aspect of the battlefield that began right away. And because it was commercially purchased and it was never part of the park, eventually it became the Gettysburg Country Club and really wasn't considered part of the battlefield the way it should have been early on.
Good, and what we'll close with, I think, is that it's interesting that this was so popular that eventually there was a road that went across Willoughby's Run. There was a bridge, and you could take, I believe by rail or other manners, you could get to the Springs Hotel right across Willoughby's Run. Wouldn't it be great eventually if someday people could go from the first day's field and they could walk from Seminary Ridge to McPherson's Ridge across Willoughby's Run safely and onto this tract here, preserved in part by the American Battlefield Trust, or parking at that tract, which is also being preserved by the American Battlefield Trust. Wouldn't it be great?
It would be. And you know, one thing I'd add to that is the park had purchased this tract, the Emanuel Harmon Farm, years ago, and we've been waiting for an opportunity to perhaps build a bridge to gain better access to the site. But the purchase of this property in that parking lot will immediately open up access to the site for the general public.
Good, good. You know, this was a tract that we thought was lost. I mean, it seemed like it was a done deal. Members of the local community, other people stepped up, and you, the members of this organization, have really stepped up to get us almost to the finish line. We are almost there. Sorry to have to ask you again, but we really hope you can get involved. Please click the link associated with this post, and thanks for everything you do for battlefield preservation and education.
Hello, this is Trace Atkins. To stay up to date on all the latest and coolest videos, please subscribe to the Trust's YouTube channel. Preserve, educate, inspire.